The transport shuttle Judicial Mercy shuddered as it docked with Blackwater Station, sending vibrations through the restraint chair where Tobias Reed sat with his hands bound in photon cuffs. Through the narrow viewport, he watched the dying star that the prison orbited, a bloated red giant that cast everything in shades of rust and amber. The star was collapsing slowly, just like the hope of everyone sent here. "Prisoner 8742, droned the automated voice. "Welcome to Blackwater Station. Your sentence is 15 cycles. Cooperation is mandatory. Resistance is futile." Tobias couldn't help but smile at the dramatic phrasing. Even the galaxy's criminal justice system had a flair for the theatrical. He'd been convicted of reckless communication with prohibited entities, which sounded much more dangerous than what he'd actually done. As an astronomer working on humanity's deep space listening project, he'd picked up a signal from a quarantined sector and, in his excitement, had broadcast a response before checking the regulations. The signal had turned out to be from an ancient AI that the Galactic Council had deemed too dangerous to contact. Oops, the shuttle's rear hatch hissed open, and 2 guards entered. The first was a towering Xanthari, with 4 arms and chitinous plates covering most of his body. His face was angular and severe, with eyes that reflected the red light like polished obsidian. This was Warden Kelver, according to the name etched on his uniform in 3 different galactic scripts. The second guard was shorter, barely 5.5 feet tall, with smooth azure skin that seemed to emit a faint glow. Delphian, Tobias recognized. Her kind were bioluminescent, their skin reflecting their emotional states. Right now, she pulsed with a soft yellow curiosity mixed with professional caution. Her nameplate read, Myra Soneth. "Stand up," Kelver ordered, his voice like grinding metal. Slowly, Tobias complied, his muscles stiff from the 3-day journey. As he rose, he noticed Mira's bioluminescence shift to a pale green surprise, maybe concern. He was used to that reaction. At 6'2", with an athletic build from years of hiking between telescope arrays, he didn't look like the dangerous criminal his classification suggested. "You're the human," Kelver said, studying him with those reflective eyes. "Class 9 environmental hazard. Class 9? Tobias raised his eyebrows. "That seems excessive. I'm an astronomer, not a warlord." "You contacted the void mind." Mira spoke for the first time, her voice musical, like wind chimes. "Do you understand what that entity could have done with an open communication channel?" "Probably less than what the Council did by quarantining it in the first place," Tobias said mildly. "Isolation breeds resentment, not peace." Kelver's chitinous plates rattled a Xanthari laugh, though it sounded like ceramic tiles falling downstairs. "A philosopher. How refreshing. Most prisoners arrive either screaming or silent. You're neither. Would either of those help my situation?" Tobias asked. "No, and I'll save my energy." Myra's glow shifted to amber amusement, perhaps respect. She stepped forward and deactivated his photon cuffs with a touch of her datapad. "Follow us. Try anything stupid, and the station's security system will flood your nervous system with pain signals. You'll wish you were dead." "Noted. I'll keep my stupidity to a minimum." They led him through corridors that twisted like the intestines of some vast mechanical beast. Blackwater Station had been constructed from a decommissioned mining facility, and it showed. The walls were patchwork metal, welded together with more hope than skill. Pipes dripped condensation that nobody had bothered to analyze, and the lighting flickered in a rhythm that suggested the power grid was held together by prayer and spare parts. Prisoners watched from behind energy barriers as they passed beings from dozens of species. Some humanoid, others so alien that Tobias's brain struggled to process their geometry. A few called out threats in languages his translator couldn't parse. Most just stared with the hollow eyes of people who'd forgotten what hope looked like. "Cheerful place," Tobias observed. "It's a prison, Not a resort, Kelver said. You'll be housed in Cell Block 7 Isolation Wing. Given your classification, you'll have minimal contact with the general population. How minimal? 2 hours of recreation per week, supervised, meals delivered to your cell. Waste facilities are automated. You'll see guards during inspections and medical checks. Otherwise, you'll be alone for 15 cycles. Tobias felt the weight of that number. 15 years, in human terms. His daughter would be 21 when he got out. She'd be an adult, her childhood finished without him. The thought made his chest tighten. Myra glanced back at him, her bioluminescence flickering between amber and deep blue sympathy. He realized. She could see his emotional state somehow, read it in his face or posture. They reached Cell Block 7, and Kelver pressed his palm against a security panel. The door irised open, revealing a long corridor lined with cells. Each door was solid metal, with only a small slot for food delivery and a narrow window of reinforced glass. "This is yours," Myra said, stopping at cell 42. She pressed another panel, and the door slid open with a pneumatic hiss. The cell was exactly what Tobias had expected, 3 meters by 4, with a metal bunk bolted to the wall, a waste unit in the corner, and absolutely nothing else. The walls were bare metal, already decorated with the scratches and dents of previous occupants. One wall had what looked like claw marks. Another had words etched in a language he didn't recognize. "Home sweet home," he murmured. "You have 15 minutes to settle in," Kelver said. Then lights out. Questions? Just one. Tobias turned to face them. What happened to the last person in this cell? Myra's glow went dark blue, deep sadness. He lasted 3 cycles before the isolation broke him. They transferred him to medical. He never recovered. 3 years of this. Tobias looked around the cell again. That's all it took. Blackwater breaks everyone eventually, Kelver said, but there was something in his tone, not cruelty, but resignation. The question isn't if, it's when. And I guess I'll have to be the exception. Kelver's plates rattled again. We'll see. He turned to leave, but paused at the door. Advice, human. Don't try to befriend the guards. Don't try to talk your way into privileges. Don't try to be clever. Just serve your time quietly, and maybe you'll leave here with your mind intact. Noted, Tobias said, but I'm not particularly good at being quiet. After they left, Tobias sat on the metal bunk and stared at the wall. The reality of his situation was settling in 15 years in a cell barely larger than a closet, in a prison orbiting a dying star, surrounded by beings who'd given up hope. But Tobias Red hadn't become an astronomer by accepting limitations. He'd spent his career searching for signals in the cosmic noise, finding patterns where others saw chaos, connecting dots across light years of space. If he could find meaning in the vast emptiness of space, surely he could find it here. He noticed something carved into the wall above his bunk, not words, but musical notes. Someone had etched a melody into the metal, probably with their fingernails over weeks or months. Tobias hummed the tune softly, and despite everything, he smiled. Music. Even here, in this place designed to crush hope, someone had created beauty. He pulled off his prison-issue shirt and used the rough edge of his bunk to begin carefully shredding it into strips. If isolation was meant to break him, he'd have to build something to fill the void. And if the previous occupant had left him a melody, he'd find a way to add harmony. Outside his cell, Mira stood watching through the observation monitors. He's smiling, she said to Kelver, who'd returned to check the security feed. Give him a week, the warden replied. They all smile at first. But Myra's bioluminescence shifted to pale purple hope, fragile and unexpected. Something about the human felt different. Maybe it was the way he'd looked at that carved melody. Maybe it was how he'd spoken about isolation breeding resentment. Or maybe, she thought, It was the fact that he was already creating something, with the strips of fabric weaving them together, with the patience of someone who understood that beauty took time. "I'll take that bet," she whispered, too quietly for Kelver to hear. The fourth morning of Tobias Reed's imprisonment began like all the others, with the harsh clang of the meal slot opening and a tray of gray nutritional paste sliding through. What made this morning different was the soft humming that echoed through the corridor outside his cell. Tobias sat up on his bunk, where he'd been weaving together strips of fabric from his extra uniform. Over the past 3 days, he'd created something resembling a small tapestry, though calling it art would be generous. What mattered was the process, the rhythm of over-under-through that kept his mind occupied during the endless hours. The humming grew closer. It wasn't a melody he recognized, but it had a haunting quality notes that seemed to shimmer and bend in ways that shouldn't be possible with a voice alone. Through the narrow window of his cell door, he caught a glimpse of someone moving past, a tall, willowy figure with skin that shifted between pale violet and silver like mother of pearl. "Hello?" Tobias called out, surprising himself with his eagerness to hear another voice. The humming stopped. Footsteps approached his door. "You shouldn't talk to me," came a female voice, soft but clear. "Guards aren't supposed to fraternize with prisoners." "You don't sound like a guard." A pause. "I'm not. Maintenance engineer. I'm checking the atmospheric processors in this block." Tobias moved to the door, peering through the window. The woman stood there in a maintenance jumpsuit, holding a toolkit that looked like it had been assembled from spare parts of a dozen different technologies. Her face was angular, with large eyes that held flecks of gold, and her hair moved on its own, not from any breeze, but with a life of its own, each strand swaying like kelp in a gentle current. "You're Melodian," Tobias said, recognizing her species from his astronomy training. Melodians came from a world where sound was the primary sense, where they'd evolved to hear and produce frequencies far beyond most species' range. "Farina Thale," she said, seeming surprised he knew. "And you're the human astronomer, the one who talked to the void mind." Tobias read, "And I prefer the one who said hello to an entity that might have been lonely. Sounds less apocalyptic." Farina's hair rippled amusement, he guessed. Melodians expressed emotions through movement and sound in ways that most species couldn't fully perceive. "The guards say you've been humming. I found a melody carved into my wall. Someone before me left it behind. May I hear it?" Tobias hummed the tune he'd memorized, letting it flow naturally. It was simple, only 8 bars, but there was something melancholic about it, like a lullaby for the lost. Farina's entire body went still. Her hair stopped moving, and her skin shifted to a deep indigo. When she spoke again, her voice was thick with emotion. "That was Thren Nolok's song. He was here 2 years ago. A Delphian poet, imprisoned for writing verses that the council deemed seditious. What happened to him? He died 3 months into his sentence. They said his heart gave out, but..." Farina's hair began moving again, agitated. "Melodians can hear things others can't. I heard his last song, the vibrations through the walls. He didn't die of a broken heart. His heart broke from dying inside while still alive." Tobias felt the weight of that. "Then I'll make sure his melody isn't forgotten." "Why?" Farina leaned closer to the door, her golden-flecked eyes searching his face. "Why would you care about a dead prisoner's song? Most people here, they stop caring about anything beyond survival." "Because," Tobias said slowly, working through the thought as he spoke, "isolation is only fatal if you let it make you forget that you're connected to something larger. That melody connects me to Thren, to whoever carved it, to you now. That's worth preserving." Farina stared at him for a long moment. Then she glanced down the corridor, checking for guards. "I shouldn't do this," she whispered. If they catch me ... Then don't, Tobias said quickly. I won't ask you to risk anything. But Verena was already pulling something from her toolkit, a small device no bigger than her palm, made of crystalline structures that caught the light and threw rainbow patterns across the walls. It's a resonance chamber. My people use them for meditation, for preserving songs. If you sing or hum into it, it will remember and play back. She pressed it through the meal slot. Tobias caught it, feeling its surprising warmth. Why are you helping me? He asked. Because I heard you humming Thren's song, and for the first time in 2 years, it didn't sound sad. Verena's skin shifted to a warm amber. It sounded like a beginning, not an ending. Before Tobias could respond, footsteps echoed down the corridor. Verena's eyes widened. Hide it. Don't let them find it. Then she was moving away, her humming resuming as if the conversation had never happened. The footsteps belonged to Mirasonov, making her morning rounds. Her bioluminescence was a professional blue-green as she approached his cell, but it flickered to yellow when she saw him standing at the door. Talking to the maintenance crew, Prisoner Reed? Just listening to her work, Tobias said honestly. She has a beautiful voice. Myra's glow shifted to amber amusement mixed with wariness. Verena is? She's kind. Too kind for a place like this. Don't give her reason to risk her job. I wouldn't dream of it. Good. Myra studied him through the window. You're handling isolation better than most. Kelver thinks you're waiting for something. Planning an escape, maybe. I'm not planning anything. I'm just trying to remember that I'm still human, still connected to the universe, even from inside this box. By weaving fabric scraps? By creating something that wasn't here before. By finding beauty in constraint. Tobias held up his crude tapestry. It's not much, but it's mine. It's proof that I can still make choices, even small ones. Myra's bioluminescence went deep purple, that color he'd learned meant hope or longing. The Delphian who had your cell before you, she said quietly, he was a poet. He carved songs into everything: the walls, the bunk frame, even the waste unit. The guards thought he was losing his mind, but I think he was trying to do what you're doing, leaving proof that he existed, that he felt things. What was his name? Thren Moloch. Then I'll make sure his songs aren't forgotten. Something in Mayra's expression shifted. Her bioluminescence cycled through colors too fast for Tobias to interpret. Finally, she said, I'm not supposed to tell you this, but there's a place. In the maintenance tunnels, where Verena goes during her breaks. Some of the staff know about it, but we ... We pretend we don't. If somehow you ended up there during your recreation hours, if you happened to take a wrong turn, that sounds dangerous for everyone involved. It is, Mira met his eyes. But maybe some risks are worth taking. She left without another word, her bioluminescence fading to soft blue as she continued her rounds. Tobias waited until he was alone, then carefully examined the resonance chamber Verena had given him. It was exquisite, like holding a frozen moment of song. He hummed Thren's melody into it, and the device captured it perfectly, then played it back with harmonics that brought tears to his eyes. The next 2 days passed in the usual monotony, but Tobias filled them with experimentation. He hummed different melodies into the resonance chamber songs from Earth. Some he'd learned as a child, others he'd picked up during his travels through the galaxy. Each one the device captured and could layer with others, creating harmonies that transformed his cell into something resembling a chapel. On the 6th day, during his allocated recreation hour, Mira came to escort him. But instead of leading him to the standard recreation area, she took a different turn at the 3rd junction. Careful, she said casually. The floor panels are unstable here. Maintenance hasn't fixed them. If you were to fall through one and end up in the sublevel tunnels, it might take me 15 minutes to find you and bring you back. Tobias understood. I'll be very careful. 15 minutes, Myra repeated. Then she turned and walked away, her bioluminescence a vivid purple. Tobias examined the floor. One panel had clearly been loosened, and beneath it was a ladder leading down into dimly lit tunnels. He descended quickly, his heart racing with the first real excitement he'd felt since his arrest. The sublevel was a maze of pipes and conduits, lit by emergency lighting that cast everything in shades of amber. But there was a sound music, faint but unmistakable. He followed it through the maze until he found a small chamber where pipes had been rearranged to create something like a room. Verena sat there, surrounded by resonance chambers of various sizes. They floated in the air around her, each one playing a different melody, and she was conducting them with gentle movements of her hands. Her hair moved in patterns that matched the music, and her skin shifted through colors in time with the harmonies. Tobias, she said, without turning around, I can hear your heartbeat. You're afraid, but also alive. More alive than you've been in days. This is incredible, he breathed, stepping into the chamber. You've created an orchestra. I've preserved songs. Every melody I've ever heard in this place that deserved to be remembered. She gestured, and the resonance chambers rearranged themselves, creating a space for him to sit. Guards humming old lullabies. Prisoners singing in languages nobody else understands. The vibration of hope through metal walls. Tobias pulled out his own resonance chamber. I brought songs too. From Earth, show me. He activated the device, and the chamber filled with a folk song his grandmother had taught him, simple, sweet, about stars and home and love. Verena's skin went pure white, then cycled through every color visible and some that weren't. She struggled for words. That's longing and comfort at the same time. How do your people do that? Create such complex emotional resonance? We're good at contradictions. We're violent and gentle, selfish and selfless, lonely and desperate for connection. He smiled at her. We're paradoxes that somehow work. Like you, Verena said softly. A classified threat who makes beauty in a cell. A man facing 15 years alone who shares songs instead of hoarding them. They spent the remaining 12 minutes trading melodies, layering earth songs with melodian harmonics, creating something neither culture had produced alone. When Myra's footsteps echoed through the tunnels, a warning, they quickly hid the resonance chambers. Same time next week? Verena asked, her hair moving in patterns that Tobias was beginning to recognize as hope. I'll be here. As Myra found him and led him back to his cell, Tobias realized something fundamental had shifted. The isolation wasn't broken. He was still locked in a cell 22 hours a day. But it was no longer absolute. He had songs to remember, harmonies to create, and someone who saw him as more than his classification. That night, lying on his bunk, Tobias hummed a new melody into his resonance chamber, something that combined Thren's original song with elements of earth folk music and melodian harmonics. It was rough, imperfect, but it was also something unprecedented. A song of connection across species, across time, across the walls meant to keep being separate. Through the wall. In the adjacent cell, another prisoner began humming along, then another down the corridor. Within an hour, cell block 7 was filled with voices, each adding their own variation to the melody. Warden Kelver, watching from the security monitors, saw his orderly prison beginning to change in ways he couldn't quite name and didn't entirely hate. Beside him, Myra's bioluminescence glowed pure purple hope, brilliant and defiant. What have we started? Kelver muttered. Something beautiful, Myra whispered. Finally,